For many UK businesses, France is the first port of call when looking to trade overseas, and there are a number of reasons for this. Well, here to discuss some of those with me is Martin Hedges. He's from Invest in France agency. First of all, why is France an attractive option for businesses wishing to trade overseas?
That's a very good question. I mean, firstly, I suppose it's the proximity and the familiarity. Most executives are likely to have been with their family or for other reasons to France, and it's a mere 2 hours to 4 hours away, so that one can conveniently set up there. So those are the reasons, perhaps.
Okay, and are there any specific sectors or areas that are particularly important for UK businesses?
Well, I suppose the first thing is that logistics is something that someone might choose to go to Europe for. That is a distribution centre where they can supply Germany, Belgium, maybe Italy, maybe Spain. Well, France is well placed geographically for just that. It's got 10,500 kilometres of motorway, so physical distribution, it's a good place to set up. But aside from that, no matter what the business, there are what we call in French pôles de compétitivité, which are excellence clusters, which means that really no matter what you do, whether you're in nanotechnology or food technology, you can indeed find a place where you can meet companies that are doing work similar to yourselves, and an area which has a university which might be doing R&D in your particular field. So that would be another reason to choose France, I would suggest.
Okay, and are there any particular factors that make it easy for UK businesses to trade with France?
Well, again, I mentioned the familiarity. I mean, that is a useful component to the mix. But there are very, very good R&D tax credits, for example, which is something which, if a company has an R&D department, albeit that they might not be trading in France right now, they could indeed move their R&D department to France and benefit from these tax credits, which are, I believe, to be the best in Europe. So if one's doing R&D, and R&D is a very great cost in a lot of businesses, one can move your R&D to France and actually benefit much better than one could in the UK.
Okay, so there are lots of reasons why people should think about France, but are there any particular factors that people need to be aware of? Cultural, linguistic, infrastructure, so on?
Well, absolutely, all of those things. Infrastructure-wise, probably no. I mean, if you think about France, it is the home of the TGV, it is the home of Ariane, it is the home of Airbus industry. So in terms of civil engineering, in terms of infrastructure, it is very, very, very well placed. But culturally, yes, I think that it's likely to be the first step outside the UK. Any business, particularly an SME, needs to be thinking that culturally things are different. They always are. As I say, they might have been to France for holidays, but to do business in France, it is a different context. Things are not bureaucratic, but they're done in a different pace. And maybe the Anglo-Saxon method of trying to hassle things along is inappropriate. If one goes with the flow, it is very, very, very much more likely to be a successful investment. So I would say that. And the other thing, I know this sounds cruel, but if one is thinking about investing in France, look in the mirror. And the reason I say that is because many of the words that the French use about the English, pejorative words, are exactly the same pejorative words that the English use about the French. Words like chauvinist, arrogant, self-opinionated. Sadly, we are, divided by 23 miles of sea, and we're very similar. And we mustn't forget that, I think. So I would add that to the mix, and that's a very.
And does that change based on where you are in France? For example, particular regions.
Yes, it's probably so. I mean, if one goes to the southwest, for example, it is very much an area that is a different culture. It's much more Mediterranean. Well, the whole of the south is much more Mediterranean. But if one goes to Nord-Pas-de-Calais, for example, that is much very similar to Kent in lots of aspects. So yes, one forgets perhaps that France is a very large country, and so choosing where one should be is important.
And what about the linguistics? Should you speak in French?
Well, it's nice if you can. And as you may have noticed, I'm not very French, but my colleagues are very sweet. I often join meetings which are in French. I might ask a question in English, and for the next 5 minutes, all my French colleagues are speaking English to one another. The myth of French people not being able to speak English, particularly in business, is a myth from 20 years ago. That's gone now, I think it's fair to say.
Okay, so what advice then would you give UK businesses who are thinking about this big step?
Mm-hmm. It is a big step, and particularly for SMEs, because the project tends to fall on the shoulders of the chief executive or the board director. Whereas if you're a huge multi-million pound company, you've got slews of lawyers and accountants that can do the basic research. For an SME particularly, it's hard work no matter what, and you can't sort of take your eye off your day job to do this. So this is one thing that Invest in France appreciates, to bring people to people that are interested in investing in France, bring them to a successful conclusion is really what we're set up to do. We have counsellors in the UK, they are English speakers, they will set up links, they will bring the person perhaps to France and introduce them to individual companies or regulatory authorities or regional heads of regional government, so that they can get a real feel for what is available. We've even done real estate searches for people, so that all of those services are available simply by calling a London telephone number at Invest in France. But that's the commercial over with. The thing, as I would say, is do your homework. Make sure that you really have found out exactly what the regulatory situation is for your particular business. And it might be that you've thought about starting a business in Paris, and perhaps actually you'd do better to invest in Lyon or in Marseille.
Okay.
So because you've got to remember that France is a very regional country.
Absolutely. So just to summarise, where can people go for more information, more advice?
Well, Invest in France agency. We're in London. We're also in Dublin, and there's a website which is very, very useful for basic information. But just give us a call, the number's there, and we're always happy to talk.
Lovely stuff. Thank you very much indeed for coming in.
Thank you.